Gib Gibson was an ordinary high school senior going through the usual stress and uncertainty before graduation and college. He was looking forward to the moment when his life would change, when he would finally begin a new phase. However, with each day approaching the milestone, he felt his life getting stuck in place. Instead of being happy that he and his best friend Lance had successfully qualified for different universities, Gib was feeling more and more empty. He couldn't understand why the event wasn't bringing him that long-awaited satisfaction. In his eyes, everything was still the same. His personal life seemed uninteresting and insignificant. He dreamed of having a girlfriend, but every step he took in that direction was a bummer. Despite his dream of a romantic relationship, Gib couldn't escape the feeling that, unlike so many others, he was unlucky in this matter. He often pondered his failures and frustrations in his attempts to build relationships with women. Each time his endeavors ended in a breakup or failed acquaintance, he felt his self-confidence weakening. The failures with Allison, the girl who seemed perfect for him, were especially painful, but their relationship didn't work out, and Gib seemed increasingly convinced that he had no chance of happiness in love. So when he received a letter from Lance, offering him a trip to California, his heart was filled with an unexpected but strong sense of hope. Lance was inviting him to spend time in sunny California, surrounded by new faces and new opportunities. For Gib, this was a chance that couldn't be passed up. He felt he just needed to break out of his usual grey routine, give himself a chance to refresh and rethink his life. And although Lance wasn't an angel in the classic sense, his offer was a real ray of light for Gib. Lance, despite his frivolity and not always serious approach to life, had always been there for Gib in difficult moments, supporting him and offering help. He believed that Gib needed to break out of his world and start looking at life from a different perspective. He was sure that it was in California, among new experiences and interesting people, that Gib would be able to find something important for himself, perhaps even his destiny. Lance had no doubt that Gib would meet a girl who would really be right for him. Lance insisted on the trip, assuring his friend that this time and place could change everything. Giving in to Lance's confidence, Gib decides to go on the trip. He begins to actively prepare for the trip and decides to use a ride-sharing service to save on transportation costs. After a while, he finds a couple willing to give him a ride. It was Gary and Mary Ann, a middle-aged couple on their way to California. Gib had nothing against traveling with strangers. On the contrary, he saw it as a chance to have new experiences and perhaps take his mind off his own problems. Although his nervousness and doubts never left him, he was looking forward to being on the road. He hoped that the road and new acquaintances would help him, at least temporarily, to forget his personal worries and focus on the journey that he believed could be the beginning of something new and meaningful. Traveling with Gary and Mary Ann was something quite different for Gib. These two were lively and talkative, which helped him to disconnect from his own frustrations. In their conversations, he tried to find something important and perhaps even some life lesson for himself. Each new conversation, each encounter with others on the road became steps toward the inner liberation Gib was seeking. But things get worse when Gib discovers that Allison Bradbury, a girl in his class, is taking the same route. Allison is going to visit her boyfriend Jason in California. This creates even more tension between them, because from the beginning Gib and Allison have not gotten along. Allison has always been a smart and ambitious girl, and Gib thought she was inaccessible and mysterious. His relationship with her was complicated, full of misunderstandings and innuendo. Their interactions had always been burdened by this tension, and their trip only seemed to make things worse. Their relationship has been strained from the beginning, and the trip only makes it worse. Gib and Allison can't find common ground, constantly arguing and figuring things out, which makes the trip even more difficult for the whole group. There seems to be no end to their company, and the two can't seem to stop annoying each other. The couple that Gib and Allison are traveling with decides to drop them off in the middle of a deserted area, leaving the two of them with conflicts and misunderstandings. This decision seems unexpected because despite their constant arguments, Gary and Mary Ann probably expected Gib and Allison to be able to find common ground. However, instead of finding a compromise, the couple decided to get rid of their problematic traveling companions, leaving them to fend for themselves. Gib and Allison are forced to continue on their own, and things get even worse when they encounter a middle-aged man who tries to molest Allison. The situation becomes more tense when the man begins to express his intentions in an aggressive manner. Gib intervenes, defending her, and they both decide to continue traveling together despite their differences. This event becomes a turning point in their relationship. It makes them trust each other a little more, although there are still many contradictions in their souls. The situation becomes even more desperate when they don't have enough money for a bus ticket and are forced to stay in a cheap motel. With no other choice, they decide to spend the night there, realizing that under the circumstances of the trip, it is the only way out. Gib becomes jealous when he hears Allison talking to Jason on the phone and, desperate, spends his remaining money on alcohol to drown out his worries. He sings Christmas carols with the locals, which looks a bit ridiculous, but nevertheless he manages to forget himself, at least for a while. This strange behavior is caused by his inner feelings, which he cannot put into words. It was not just a way for him to relax, but an attempt to escape from reality. The next morning, Gib, deciding that their situation needs some sort of solution, concocts a plan to regain control of the situation. He convinces Allison that she should stuff her shirt with scarves to give the appearance of pregnancy, as this will increase their chances of getting a ride. With this plan, they decide to continue on their way, and with luck on their side, they make it to the restaurant. At some point, Gib begins to realize that Allison, although annoying to him, is actually an important part of his life at this point. However, Allison realizes that she forgot her notebook and cash at the motel, which puts them at odds again. They find themselves stranded again, but despite this, they continue to stick together as they face new challenges. They become more united despite all the contradictions. The evening after they have been through a series of unpleasant events, Allison remembers that she has her father's credit card. They use it to stay at an expensive hotel where they can afford a lavish dinner and drinks. The next morning, waking up to find Gib hugging her in her sleep, Allison finds the strength to let go of the situation and begin to see Gib differently. But Gib, upon waking, quickly pulls away, realizing that his feelings for Allison are still not entirely clear. This morning event becomes an important moment in the development of their relationship, and as Gib goes on, he realizes that his feelings for Allison are not as shallow as he had previously thought. Allison, in turn, realizes that her perception of Gib is changing. While traveling by truck through Arizona, Allison overhears Gib talking to the driver, where he confesses that he is going to California to meet the one and only. This moment becomes significant to Allison as she realizes that Gib, despite all his failures and oddities, finds his ideal in some other person. When they finally arrive in California, Allison angrily breaks up with Gib, deciding that they are not going their separate ways. She decides that her relationship with Gib is over and she is no longer ready to be with him. However, Gib decides to go to a Christmas party where Lance arranges to meet the very reliable girl he has been talking about. Lance tries to help Gib, but he is increasingly lost in his thoughts and feelings. At the party, Allison and Gib run into each other again. Their mutual jealousy leads to conflict, and Gib decides to spend time with the girlfriend he brought along. In the process, however, he can't help but think about Allison, and this feeling proves to be much stronger than anything he had with his new girlfriend. It becomes a sort of internal conflict for him. When the party ends, Gib can't get rid of the thought of what happened between him and Allison, and he realizes that he can't keep pretending that his feelings for her don't matter. When they return to campus, the atmosphere between Gib and Allison remains tense. However, in English class, Professor Taub reads an essay written by Gib in which he describes his night with the girl. He realizes that his relationship with the girl was not really what he really wanted. This moment opens Gib up to his own feelings and the realization that his relationship with Allison is much more important to him. Gib finally realizes that he has fallen in love with Allison, and that this night meant much more to him than he first thought. Allison, realizing that Gib actually feels something serious for her, begins to rethink his feelings and decides to give their relationship a second chance. On the way home, they start talking as friends again, and at one point there is a silence between them that is filled with understanding.